Some big news stories for our Supreme Leader, Keir Starmer, over the last 24 hours. First of all, someone tried to set fire to his house, but I'll talk more about that later. And he also delivered a speech introducing Labour's new immigration policy. It was a speech that was filled with the kind of far-right rhetoric that would probably have the police knocking at your door if you posted it on Twitter. And yet somehow, I don't really believe Keir Starmer. I'll explain that later too. But first, let's take a look at what he actually said.
We risk becoming an island of strangers, not a nation that walks forward together. So when you have an immigration system that seems almost designed to permit abuse, that encourages some businesses to bring in lower paid workers rather than invest in our young people, or simply one that is sold by politicians to the British people on an entirely false premise, then you're not championing growth, you're not championing justice, or however else people defend the status quo. You're actually contributing to the forces that are slowly pulling our country apart. So yes, I believe in this. I believe we need to reduce immigration significantly.
As I mentioned, I don't really trust Keir Starmer, especially when it comes to immigration, but I am at least going to understand what he has said. Now, in that speech, he spoke about the Labour Immigration White Paper, and he personally wrote the foreword, the introduction to that paper. So let me just read one paragraph from it so you can get an understanding of the kind of rhetoric that he is now using. The damage this has done to our country, this being mass migration, is incalculable. Public services and housing have been placed under too much pressure. Our economy has been distorted by perverse incentives to import workers rather than invest in our own skills. In sectors like engineering, for example, apprenticeships have almost halved, while visas have doubled. Now, here's the thing. I don't trust Keir Starmer to keep to his word, but what he is saying there is true. And I have no problem agreeing with Keir Starmer when he is coming to my position. I have not changed my position to become more like the Labour Party. Keir Starmer has changed his position. Another really interesting thing that he said in that speech was that it feels as though our immigration system is designed to be abused. And that is also true.
It was very easy. So I had my cousin who was here, and she's the one who helped us to set up a company. She set up a company to bring us out of Zimbabwe, and that's how we managed to come here. So actually her care company is not working. It's not there as I'm speaking right now. It doesn't exist. So she just helped us to
so
come
hang
into
on, Jamie. Whoa. So your family member set up a company that acted as a provider of carers, through which they recruited you from abroad.
Yes.
And you went into a care home for precisely 3.5 minutes or whatever, and then looked for other work. So you manipulated the system for yourself, or you feel like you used the system to its best effects for you?
Absolutely.
I'm pretty sure Tom Swarbrick will become radicalised if he keeps getting callers like this. Now, I mentioned at the start of the video that I don't really trust Keir Starmer, and I don't. And the reason for that is, if you are really serious about these problems, the first thing you would do is leave the ECHR and repeal the Human Rights Act. That won't leave Britain as a nation without any human rights. That's just what the crazy lefties want people to think. That is absolute nonsense. In fact, the Human Rights Act, well, the ECHR, was based on UK common law in the first place, something that the left never seemed to acknowledge. But I also don't trust him because, let's be honest, this is a complete U-turn for Keir Starmer. This is a guy who has, for years, been telling everyone how great immigration is for the country. He's a human rights lawyer who spent much of his career defending the rights of migrants to stay in the UK to get benefits, even if they've committed crimes. So how can I trust this complete 180 from him? Let me put a clip in now of what Keir Starmer was saying just a few years ago.
We need to make the wider case on immigration. We welcome migrants. We don't scapegoat them. Low wages, poor housing, poor public services are not the fault of migrants and people who've come here. They're political failure. Political failure. So we have to make the case for the benefits of migration, the benefits of free movement.
As you can probably tell, that is quite the change in position for Keir Starmer. But there's another reason that I don't really trust him, and that's all to do with the current talks he is engaging in with the EU. He's trying to do an EU reset, a new deal with the European Union after Brexit. Okay, but as part of that deal, he may have to concede some form of free movement. Now, at the moment, that's looking like a youth movement scheme. So people under the age of 40 who are EU citizens would be able to come to work in the UK. Now, I just want to make clear, I don't have a problem with some hard-working Germans or French or Poles coming to the UK for a few years and then going back home. But the population of Germany has changed. There are new Germans, basically Syrians with German passports. And I'm just going to lay it out straight. I don't want Syrians flooding across the border into the UK. I don't. Now, as much as I don't take Keir Starmer very seriously, some people do. And their reactions have been, frankly, hilarious. Lefties have been calling him racist. His own MPs have called him far-right, shameful and dangerous. And one even compared him to Enoch Powell. I wish Keir Starmer was a bit more like Enoch Powell. And actually, I am loving this total meltdown in the Labour Party because Keir Starmer has moved an inch to the right. And Kemi Badenoch, what about her? Yeah, well, she's not very happy about all this either.
I think Labour are taking us for fools, quite frankly. I think they are taking us for fools.
And let me tell you why the Tories are so unhappy about this. It's not because they care, and it's not because they fundamentally disagree with what Keir Starmer is saying. It's because he said it. And they thought they weren't allowed to say things like this. The Tories have spent so long taking their moral compass from the left about what is politically correct enough to say and not say, that they would never have dreamed of saying these kinds of things. And that's why they're so angry. They feel betrayed by the Labour Party. I mean, get this. Keir Starmer said that you should only be in England if you can speak English. The Tories would never have dreamed of saying something like that. In fact, the police must be very confused right now because just a couple of months ago, that kind of thing was being invested as a potential hate crime.
Apparently during some conversations between yourself, apparently you have alleged, and we weren't here, so I don't know you said it, but you've alleged to say, speak English, or worse to that effect?
Speak clearly.
Speak clearly.
No,
okay.
the gentleman's partially deaf.
Yeah, he can speak clearly. Yeah.
So I couldn't even hear him.
No, and that's fine, and that's why we've just come to speak, because potentially someone could perceive that as a hate crime.
Now, whether or not you actually trust Keir Starmer and what he's saying is almost a bit irrelevant, because this is still a fundamentally good thing. He has pushed the rhetorics of politics in Britain to the right. He's shifted the Overton window in our favour. New things are now generally politically acceptable to talk about and discuss. And that's great. It's going to force Tories to go to the right, which is in turn going to force Reform to also push even more to the right. And given that they're almost certainly going to be the party of government in 2029, that is great news. Frankly, I wouldn't be surprised to hear Nigel Farage talking about detention camps and mass deportations in just a few months' time. The exact same kind of language that he kicked Rupert Lowe out of the party for. But anyway, I can't believe I'm saying this. It's very difficult to say, but thank you, Keir Starmer. I'll probably never say that again, ever. And I haven't forgotten that other story, don't worry, because yes, someone tried to set fire to Keir Starmer's house.
And it's this, a blaze has broken out at a home that's understood to belong to the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. Emergency services were called to a residential home in northwest London in the early hours of this morning. No one was injured in the fire, and an urgent investigation has now been launched. Now, a cordon remains in place on the streets this afternoon, and a spokesperson for the Metropolitan Police said officers attended the scene. Damage was caused to the property's entrance. Nobody was hurt. The fire is being investigated and cordons remain in place while inquiries continue.
Look, this is just ridiculous, and I absolutely do not support this kind of behaviour. Of course, I completely disagree with Keir Starmer when it comes to politics, but what exactly do you think is going to be achieved by this? This guy, yes, he may be a bit weedy, he may be a bit of a coward, but he has armed police protection for the rest of his life. All you've done is prove that whatever political position you hold is held by absolute lunatics. It's not going to win him over. It's not going to achieve anything whatsoever. But not only that, Keir Starmer doesn't live there. He lives at number 10 Downing Street, a place I super do not recommend you try and firebomb, by the way, because that will not end well for you at all. But whilst he's living in number 10 Downing Street, he's renting out his private residence. So really what you've just done is potentially firebombed the house of some poor sods who are renting it. And they might not even know that Keir Starmer is their landlord. So yeah, brilliant, well done. This leads to another question. Who exactly did this and why? And ordinarily you might just assume that it must be someone with right-wing beliefs because, well, Keir Starmer is the Labour Prime Minister. But I'm not so convinced, because it's not the right wing in Britain that have a tradition of destroying property as a form of protest. No, that would be the left wing. And I am firmly convinced that there is really no organised far right in Britain, but there absolutely is an organised far left. Keir Starmer has been pushing to the right. He's talking now about cutting immigration. He's talking about cutting benefits. And I would not be surprised if this has angered some lefties enough to do something as radical as this. After all, some of them are calling him racist and comparing him to Enoch Powell. So I would not be surprised if this turns out to be some kind of lefty who has done this. Anyway, I suppose there is one more final question, which is a very interesting one. And that is, would I ever vote for the Labour Party? Now, I am a firm believer that you always have to keep your voting options open. And let me explain why. If you are a lifelong Tory voter and you will never change your mind and you are completely dead set in those views, no political party will ever listen to what you have to say. The Tories won't, because you're a lifelong Tory voter. You're not going anywhere. We don't actually need to listen to you. We might as well go and try and appeal to someone else. And the Labour Party and Reform and all of those other parties, they won't listen to you either, because you're a lifelong Tory voter. You're dead set in your ways and you're never going to change your mind. The only way that your political opinions and views actually mean something is if you're open to voting for different parties. If you're completely closed off to that possibility, then there is no reason for any political party to ever listen to you. The same is true, by the way, for people who never vote. You will not be listened to. Your political views will not be listened to if you never vote, because those parties are like, why would I try and appeal to this guy? He's not even going to turn up at the ballot box anyway. So, with all that being said, what would it take for me to vote Labour? Well, I'll set some terms. If he can bring migration, by the time of the next general election, if he can bring migration down to 50,000 or below, preferably zero, and conduct 1 million deportations before the next general election, then I would probably vote for Labour at that point. Why? Well, because he's proven that he's serious. He's proven that he's serious about mass deportations, about getting huge numbers of people out of our country. So that would be a really good start. But not only is he serious, he's proven that he can do it. He's using the tools of the state. He's getting flights taking off and going back to North Africa or the Middle East or wherever it may be. And he's proven that he is the most efficient person at using the state apparatus to get this done. I will be voting at the next general election for whoever I think has the best chance of removing the most people possible from the UK. That's just how I feel about it. Now, fortunately for me, it's very unlikely that that's going to be Keir Starmer. It's probably going to end up being Nigel Farage. But, as I say, it's really important to keep your voting options open. So if Keir Starmer proves me wrong and suddenly goes full-on far right and starts doing mass deportations, then yeah, okay, he would win me over. I'm pretty sure I'm never going to be left in that kind of situation where I have to worry about that, because Keir Starmer would lose all of his own lefty voters in the process. That being said, I do think that the Labour Party is now quite concerned that they've brought so many migrant groups to the country that they're no longer voting Labour, but they're just voting for their own candidates. So I do think there's a sense in which Labour are sort of no longer really that bothered about appealing to the migrant vote because, well, they're just not voting Labour. So Labour doesn't really care about them anymore. And that is what I've said for a long time. These groups, a lot of people panic when they start, electing their own Islamist MPs. And sure, it is bad. And then you have people talking about cousin marriage in the Houses of Parliament, which is not really very classy. But as soon as they start voting not for Labour, but for their own MPs, Labour will stop caring about them because actually there's no point. They can't rely on them for votes anymore. So they'll just ignore these small client groups like the Pakistanis, for example. Anyway, 4 minutes and 20 seconds of pure rambling. Let me know what you guys think. Do leave a like, comment, subscribe. The last video was really interesting. A lot of people said that I managed to change their minds on that topic, which was really kind of heartwarming for me to hear. I do agree with it in principle, but just not in practicality. And I managed to reply to most of those comments. So till the next one.